This is the new DJI Mavic Air 2, which for many people is going to be their very first drone. So you need to understand a lot about the drone, the controller, the app, where to fly, how to fly. Lots to take in. That's what I'm trying to get through today. Hello, I'm Ian and I play with drones, and today I am playing with the DJI Mavic Air 2. This is actually a full setup guide for the Mavic Air 2, and for total beginners I'd recommend you watch the entire video. For those that have been flying for a little bit, maybe jump to this point that I'm pointing to now, where you can skip the basic setup procedures and get straight down to some of the more interesting stuff. But who knows, if you watch the whole thing you might still pick up something else, so I don't know, maybe watch the whole video anyway. But look, first off, let's go through the main elements that you get when you actually get your drone. Now I'm going through the combo version here. You get obviously the drone itself, you get the controller which will attach to your phone to give you use of the Fly app and show you all of the information about what your drone is actually doing. You'll also have the batteries. If you have the combo version, you're going to get 2 spare batteries. You'll have the phone connectors that attach your phone to the actual remote control itself. Again, if you get the combo version, you'll have a charging hub, and you also get a couple of NDs and a natty little bag. That's basically the main elements of the package you're getting, and what I'm going to be doing today is going through each of these components, taking you through the various functions, and then basically showing you how to set it up, update the firmware, what the app means, and how to get flying. So once you've unboxed everything, the first thing you need to do is get the batteries and the remote charged up. The remote charges up via the little USB-C at the bottom. The batteries charge up either directly with the battery charger, or if you've got the combo, you get a sequential charging hub. Just one tip, the first time you're charging up the batteries, you're better off not using the charging hub. The batteries ship in a sleep mode, and the charging hub doesn't always deactivate that sleep mode. I can put a little link below for more information on that, but in the short, basically the first time you charge the batteries, charge them up directly, individually with the charger itself. Whilst the batteries are charging, you can then get to know the drone itself. First off, peel off all the little yellow stickers that are dotted around all over the place. Unfold the legs. You do have to do them in the right order, so one folds out and the other folds down like that. And then you can have a little look at what the various sensors and components of the drone are itself. At the front and the rear you've got the obstacle avoidance sensors, and you've also got a couple more sensors on the base. These are there to try and stop your drone from crashing into any obstacles as it's flying along. In the centre you've also got a landing LED which comes on in dim light when landing. You can also manually turn this on via the app if you're flying at dusk and you want to make the drone easier to see. You do also have a USB-C socket here as well. That's not for charging up the drone. You cannot charge the battery whilst it's fitted to the actual drone itself. That's just for transferring the media that you may have recorded from your SD card directly to your computer. Here you have the slot to insert your micro SD card that will capture all of the pictures and video you take. Using tweezers does help. The Air's got 8 gigs of internal memory, but having a micro SD card allows you to have a lot more recording capacity. Just make sure you get a card with a very high write speed, approaching 90 to 100 megabits per second write speed, as recording 4K video does produce a lot of data. The props can be removed and replaced by holding firm and twisting. Make sure you match the dots and the rings up so you get the right prop on the right motor. Drones actually spin their props in different directions. 2 go clockwise and 2 go anti or counterclockwise. And when you're flying or changing speed or direction, the props are either slowing down or speeding up to vary the lift or the pull, which will actually move the drone in certain directions. So each prop is responsible for literally pulling or pushing the drone in the right direction. So it's very important they're on properly and that they're not damaged. And aside from the external sensors inside the drone, you also have loads of electronics, including GPS and accelerometers that are constantly measuring and assessing what your drone is doing in relation to what it is you're commanding it to do. This allows it to stay steady and not drift with the wind and fly exactly in the direction that you tell it to. And then finally at the front you've got the camera, which is mounted on a gimbal. You have to remove the gimbal guard. You don't fly with the gimbal guard in place. That's just for when you're traveling about, because gimbal is very delicate, very sensitive, first thing to break if you do crash, so treat it with respect. But the whole idea of a gimbal enabled camera is that as the drone is moving and being buffeted about by the wind, the gimbal compensates for that, leaving you with absolutely silky smooth video. And this is one of the biggest advantages of gimbal enabled camera drones, because no matter how much the drone is being moved about, your video will always end up looking perfectly smooth. Once your battery is charged up, clip it into place. It clips in very simply, match the contacts with the contacts that are in the actual drone itself, push firm, and you hear it click into place. The specs state that you're going to have around 34 minutes maximum flight time, but in truth, various safety protocols, the return to home is going to kick in well before that, and in practice you're going to get around 26 to 28 minutes flying. So it is quite a good idea to have a spare battery, and that's why I always go for the combo, because time and time again people pushing their battery to try and get that very last photo is often a cause of things going wrong. Now let's have a quick look at the remote. This is actually a new design for DJI compared to most previous Mavic remotes. It's got a large internal battery that is good for many flights, and it is designed to clamp your phone in place to display the app whilst you fly. The joysticks are stored at the base and pull out and screw in like this. On the back you have the gimbal wheel. This tilts the camera up and down, from straight down to horizontal. You need a very light touch on this to ensure the camera tilts up and down smoothly, but I'll cover a bit more on that later. On the main face, top left, you've got the FN or function button, which you can assign to do a specific task, like center the camera or turn on the LED. You then have the flight mode switch with its 3 positions. Tripod mode slows down all movements to get very smooth and cinematic shots. Normal mode is your everyday flight mode, which flies you at a normal speed and means you do need a bit of a lighter touch when recording video to keep the turns and tilts smooth. And finally, sports mode, which increases the speed and movement of the drone significantly. Look, to be honest, sport mode is really only useful when you're flying long distances in a straight line. It massively increases the speed and braking distance, and the movements are so sudden that generally you will not get good video footage. Next is the power button. As with the drone itself, you do a quick single press, then an immediate second long press to actually get the unit switched on. And it's the same procedure for powering it off. Along the bottom, you've got 4 LED lights that actually are simply the battery indicator for the remote itself. Top right, you have the toggle for switching between video and still pictures, and I'll come on to more on that a little bit later. And again, on the back, you also have the combined shutter button or the start and stop video recording button. The remote can be used without a mobile phone attached, but you will get way more information if you attach your mobile phone. You're going to see all the functions and all the display and what it is the camera is actually seeing. So ideally, you're always going to fly with your mobile phone connected. You need to have downloaded the DJI Fly App beforehand, and you connect the phone by pulling out the clamp like that and then undoing the left-hand side of the cable. Then you slot your phone in, making sure that if you've got side buttons on your phone, you align things up so that it's not going to be pressing the buttons whilst it's holding the phone in place. Finally, you just connect the cable into the phone like that. DJI always send you at least 3 cables. You've got micro USB, you've got cable for the iPhone, and also USB-C. So just whichever is the right cable for your phone, just obviously fit that and use the cable accordingly. So with everything charged and connected, you are almost ready to switch on. If this is your first DJI drone, you're going to need to set up an account with DJI. It's free, but it links your drone to that email address. It's easiest to do this on a PC or laptop beforehand at DJI.com. So that when you power up the drone and the remote and open up the Fly app for the first time, you can simply enter that email address and password. So for the very first time, when you're first powering up your drone, it's a good idea to do that in your back garden or even inside, as long as you absolutely don't try and fly inside, because trust me, that will not go well for you and will almost certainly end up in you hitting the wall and crashing. But look, there are some setups and firmware upgrades that need to happen, and for that you do need to have good internet access. So normally it's a good idea to get those done before you actually get out in the field and try flying. It's going to prompt you to activate the drone, and it may offer you DJI's Care Refresh protection, which you may or may not choose to take out. It may also ask you to confirm the joystick configuration. For now, just leave it at the default. Then it's going to ask you to update the drone's firmware, and to do this it needs to download from the internet, so your phone needs good mobile data. Let it download the firmware package, then upload to the drone itself. This can easily take a good few minutes. But eventually it'll have updated and presents you with the option to go fly, and will show you the camera view. Now's the time to switch off and head out to find somewhere good to fly. So look, if this is going to be your first time flying, you do need to know some basics. It can be a good idea to take a friend along, as long as they don't distract you or egg you on too much and try and make you run before you can walk. At the end of the day, it's your expensive bit of kit, so you go at your own pace. But first off, the golden rule is do absolutely everything you can to avoid crashing. Most crashes are going to result in an expensive repair. You can watch my other video on the 25 ways to avoid crashing, as many of these situations happen regularly and may happen to you. As I said, flying inside is always bad news. GPS locks are intermittent and the sensors are easily confused. So your first couple of flights, go and find a nice open space far away from people, trees and buildings, so you can practice without being distracted at all. In the UK, you can't generally fly in towns or cities. There's a general rule, you've got to be at least 150 metres away from built-up areas, and even in non-built-up areas, you need to be at least 50 metres away from any uninvolved person, vehicle or building. So generally that means you cannot fly out of your back garden. And keep in mind, the police often do get called by unhappy neighbours, so find a wide open space, or better still, just go out to the open countryside. Choose an area though where you can set the drone on a nice flat piece of ground, or maybe a wooden table. Anything metal nearby is going to mess up the drone's compass and will prompt you to do a compass calibration. Also, if it's on the ground, make sure that any dogs can't get to it, as dogs do kind of go a bit mental with drones and will often run at it to find out what's going on. They can't see the spinning props and they can really hurt their face or snout. So keep it well away from animals, please. But before we get flying, the phone screen has got an incredible amount of information, so I need to cover that now to go through exactly what bit is showing you what. The default view is the main camera view with a smaller map in the lower left corner. The drone has got built-in GPS, which is the single most useful feature for flying steadily and not losing the drone. GPS means it's going to record the drone's home point location each time you take off, and this is where the drone will fly back to if it loses signal with the remote control. This can happen if you are flying too far away or suffer signal interference, or most commonly if you fly behind a hill or another building. Now, if it loses signal, it will actually reverse its path for 50 meters to try and automatically re-establish a connection. But if that still fails, it'll simply rise up to the return to home altitude and fly on a direct line straight back to its recorded home point. You set the return to home altitude in the settings, and it needs to be higher than anything around you so it won't crash into any trees or buildings if it does have to do a return to home. So along the top, you've got the main status bar, which starts off showing you that the GPS log is trying to connect to a sufficient number of satellites. Once it does, it'll then tell you that it's ready to fly, which means you now have accurate GPS. Once the message is cleared, you can tap the status again to bring up a simple pre-flight checklist that tells you for any other issues and also displays the key settings for your flight. I mentioned the return to home altitude. Have it higher than any trees or buildings around you. Default is going to be around 30 meters, 100 feet, which is about right. There's no real advantage in setting it too high, as the drone's just going to be wasting battery power and time in getting back to you if it actually needs to initiate a return to home. You can also set the maximum altitude and the maximum distance. Keep in mind, in most countries there is a 120 metre or 400 foot altitude limit for flying, and it's pretty important you stick to that to avoid skirmishes with low flying aircraft. Below that, it also shows you your memory for your photos and video and gives you the option to format the internal memory if it's full from a previous flight and you need the space. Over along the right, you also have indicators for the collision avoidance sensors. This shows red if you're in sports mode or if you've disabled them, otherwise it will be white. Next, you have the number of satellites for your GPS connection. Next is the signal strength for your remote control. Now, the Mavic Air 2 uses DJI's most powerful radio system for signal called OcuSync 2, and you will very, very rarely have any issues with your signal on day-to-day flying. All right, thank you. Next along is the battery. The number inside the battery is the percentage of charge of your drone's battery, and next to that is a countdown display that will recalculate to show you your remaining flight time. This only shows when you're actually flying. Far right lets you dive into the main settings, and this is where you can adjust certain features and behaviour of the drone, and to be honest, most of the defaults are set up right for you to start off with. Next over, I would also quickly set your preferred camera formats. If you use a Mac, you may want videos to be shot in MOV, otherwise you may want to use MP4. Colour grading can usually be left to normal, but if you do like to do a lot of post editing, then DCinelike will give you more options for colour grading using Premiere Pro or some other video editing software. The video subtitles is not actually normal subtitles, but is in fact a way of embedding all the camera data into a subtitle file embedded within your video for file extraction later. It's useful if you like to know exactly what the drone's camera is doing, but otherwise you can pretty much leave it switched off. The histogram is also useful for a quick constant reference to show how well your picture is exposed. I tend to leave that on. You also have the overexposure warning, which will put zebra stripes on any part of the picture that is washed out through overexposure. That can be a bit distracting, so you may want to leave that one switched off. And then the next option is the ability to lock your white balance manually or leave it on auto. Again, in most cases, I tend to leave this on auto. And that's mostly what I want to cover on the settings. Do have a look through the others. Most of the options are pretty self-explanatory and probably won't need any amendments by you. So returning back out to the main camera view, let's carry on with the various displays. Down the right, you dive into your camera settings where you can set things like frame rate, the type of video, or whether or not you want to shoot stills. And look, to be honest, camera settings would be another whole video. So for now, just set it to whether or not you're going to record video or stills, and play around once you're actually up flying. Next, you have the record and shutter button, which is the same as your remote button. When you film and take pictures, your phone displays what's being filmed or recorded, and it stores a scaled down version on the phone itself. The full-sized file is actually recorded on the drone's micro SD card. Next, you'll have a shortcut to your media that you previously recorded, and it gives you the option of transferring that file from your SD card to your phone without having to actually remove the SD card or connect via the USB. Keep on going down. In the bottom right corner, you have some more camera settings that allows you to switch between auto and manual. You can set these for both still shots and video as you want. In auto, you get the AE, which is the aperture exposure lock. And next to that is the EV, or the exposure value setting. Exposure lock keeps the exposure the same even if the light of the picture is actually changing. And this is useful when tilting up or down from a bright sky. EV is simply a way of lightening or darkening whatever the auto settings are offering, and again is a quick way to make a picture brighter, especially if you've got a band of bright sky along the top, but the landscape is looking a bit dark and gloomy. Alternatively, you can toggle auto off and set it to manual and adjust the shutter speed and the ISO as you see fit. There's a little metering indicator that guides you as to what it thinks is about right, but you can play around with the settings in flight when you know exactly what it is you're filming. Next up is the positioning indicator that shows the drone's actual position and orientation relative to you and the controller. This is useful for keeping your bearings, but not as useful as the little map in the lower left-hand corner. If you tap that, it expands slightly, showing you a mini map. Tap it again and you actually get a full screen with direct flight line between you and the drone itself. The map view is incredibly useful with a number of options to overlay additional data, and you can also change the layer to satellite. Have a play and see what works best for you. Anyway, look, tap the small view again or the little left arrow top left and you'll swap back to normal view. Next to the map, you also have your height and distance indicators, along with the speed indicators too, showing how fast you're flying and how fast you're descending or ascending. Remember, the altitude is not the height above the ground where the drone is flying. The altitude is always relative to the takeoff point. So if the ground is rising up slightly, watch out, because you could inadvertently fly into it. Likewise, if you fly over the edge of a cliff and descend down, it will show negative values if you descend lower than your takeoff point, but not an issue. And then when you're actually up in the air, you'll see the top and bottom, you've got collision avoidance indicators that show if you're near obstacles ahead or behind you. The indicators change colour depending on the proximity of the obstacle, and when you're up flying high, they disappear altogether, but red is closest, orange is near, and as I said, if they disappear, it means you've got no obstacles near you. And then finally, you have the takeoff button. So look, a long time coming. Are you ready for takeoff? Well, just like when you drive a car, you do still need to know a few of the controls before you start the ignition and take off. Most importantly, you need to know how to stop. You can take off automatically by just touching the takeoff button and holding the button down. This will start the props and lift it up to around 4 feet high. It's just as easy and sometimes gives you a little bit better control to start them manually by moving the sticks to the 5 and 7 o'clock position. Once the props are running, gently move the left stick up a tiny bit and the drone will lift off the ground. At this point you can let go of the sticks completely, as this will always stop the drone from moving and it will literally just hover stationary even in wind thanks to the GPS. Remember this above all else: if you're about to go wrong, just let go of the sticks, let it stop, get your head sorted and start again. So for your very first flight, get the drone up and away from you and gently move the joysticks to figure out how each one is working. Also remember, if the drone is turned and is not facing in the same direction as you, the controls will be relative to the drone's orientation, not yours. So left can suddenly become right and back can mean forward. And then finally, just have a little bit of fun. Fly up higher, spin it around, get used to the controls, just stay well away from obstacles. Remember, everything looks further away on the small screen than it is in reality. So that is how you get started. Now let's move on to some more fun and interesting things and how to avoid drama. So as I said, first things always to keep in mind when you're heading out flying anywhere. First off, have a look around you. What is the weather doing? What can go wrong? Weather is so obvious, but don't necessarily let a stiff breeze put you off. Mavic Air 2 is actually really good at handling strong wind and will sit firm. But when you've chosen your spot, do a quick self-check as to what could go wrong. Common sense says to look around you and say, well, hang on, what could go wrong here? Are there trees? Are there people? Are there buildings? Are there power lines in the distance? Don't be flying over people. Your pictures and videos are always going to look rubbish, and generally most people are not impressed when drones are flying overhead. Make sure there are no power lines nearby either as well. The obstacle avoidance sensors won't always see them, and they can also interfere with your compass and signal. Check which way the wind is blowing. A 20 to 25 mile an hour wind is actually fine to fly in, but as ever, try and fly out against the wind so you're flying back with the wind. And check the area that you're actually flying out over. If something goes wrong and you need to land fast, can you actually walk out and retrieve it, or will you lose it? Some people do get nervous flying over water, and well, certainly if you're flying over a river and you hit an overhanging tree or a bridge and the props stop, then you're definitely going to lose it. But otherwise there really is no difference to flying over water than land. As ever, golden rule, just don't push the battery. Another consideration, will any people or animals come over to your takeoff or landing point? It's never good to try and land when you're surrounded by people. And as I said before, dogs go nuts with drones and can really hurt themselves. So maybe get into the idea of hand catching. It's easier than it sounds, and it keeps the drone up out of harm's way. Another good little trick is to keep an SD card tucked away in your bag. Sooner or later you're going to get out there and realise it's still sitting in your computer at home. The Air has got an internal memory of 8 gigs, but that's only going to be enough for about 10-15 minutes worth of video. And when you're flying, keep an eye along that top of your screen. The flight time is a really good gauge on how much fun you've got left. Don't push your luck, as it doesn't really know about the wind. Keep a spare charge battery with you so you don't have to push the battery to the limit. Because without exception, people trying to get that last picture running down the battery to the last bit is the most common cause of crashes that I tend to hear about. Remember, the auto return to home feature for the low battery is going to kick in around 20 to 25% of battery, and it'll actually go into a non-cancelable, uninterruptible critical auto land when the battery hits 10%. You cannot override that. All you can do is change the direction and temporarily lift the altitude, but ultimately it's going to keep on trying to land, and it's not something you want to be fighting with. When you're up flying and filming, there's many things that will affect the end result of the video you take. Not least of all, remembering to press the record button. You would laugh if you knew how many times I've completed the most fantastic set of maneuvers and flight maneuvers only to find that I'd forgotten to press record. So make sure you've got that little square red box going if you're filming. At the moment, the Air doesn't actually have too many adjustments to smooth out the gimbal or stick movements, so having a light touch is absolutely key. Using tripod mode is going to be a great way to get smoother movement, and that will give you a much more professional end result. Have fun with quick shots. They're such a simple way to get totally professional looking shots. Just remember to be well away from trees, as quite a few of them will involve flying sideways. And make use of active track. The new Air 2 has quite literally got the most capable active track I've seen on any DJI drone. Simply click and draw a square around the subject and then choose whether or not you're going to circle around or follow. Circle will simply orbit around a central point of interest. Just tell it how fast to go and you can adjust the height and distance as you fly, but the camera is always going to stay focused on you. Active track will follow you as you move, and the trace option will follow you from behind, whilst parallel will fly alongside with you. But either way, it is a fantastically easy way to get really good footage. Another little word of warning: if gulls or other big birds start taking an interest in your drone, you probably want to get out of there fast. They can dive bomb the drone and stop the props, leaving you just watching it fall to the ground in an instant. So if the birds do start swooping your drone, increase your altitude fast, rise up above them, and then at the same time fly well away from them and back towards you. And as soon as you've got space between them and you, start to descend and get down to the ground as soon as you can. And finally, if it does go wrong and it does crash somewhere, remember the Find My Drone function that will lead you right back to the last known GPS coordinates of where the air was. I made another video on this for the Mavic Mini. The same principles apply here for the Air too. But really, this is a fantastically useful function. You can go back and find a drone that crashed the previous day, the previous week. Watch the video so you know how it works. Hopefully you'll never need to use it. So, crazy long video today, I know, but I had so much to get across to you, and hopefully I've now given you enough information to get started up, to get flying, to know how the app actually works, and to actually get up and have some fun. The new Mavic Air 2 has got all the portability of the original Mavic Air, but it has now got rock solid signal for many miles, and it's got way longer battery life. So to me, it is now the perfect drone to take hiking for days out. And I can't wait until we're able to get out again and actually get flying up in the Welsh mountains so I can put it through its paces. Anyway, look, I hope this has been helpful to you. As ever, do me a little favour and click that little thumbs up. It helps the cause. And if you haven't done so already, hit the sub, ding the dong to get notified when I put something new out. But anyway, as ever, until next time, stay safe and sane, have fun and happy flying. Cheers.